Hello everybody. We are back with another video again, Robin and myself, Trell. Today we are going to be talking about the subject of white privilege and DEI. Now this has been a crazy topic over the last 12 to 24 months or so, especially considering that we just had a change of administration and things have gotten really crazy. And we definitely want to talk about it today, not necessarily leaning to one side or the other, but we do want to go ahead and hit some of the highlights in relating to white privilege and DEI. And our F word for the day is
freaking crazy. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I say fake news.
Yeah, it's going to be fake news.
Yeah, and let me explain, because the fake news can be applicable to everyone, because it depends on what side you're on. Because if you're on one side, you're going to believe that other stuff is fake news and vice versa. So we're going to go with that to keep it a little bit on the mild side. So yeah, we're going to go with the fake news, and then...
Or we could go with facts, because we're going to bring you some facts.
Yeah, that's true. So that's probably a better word than the fake news.
Or the freaking, or the...
And what we mean by facts are not necessarily leaning from one side or the other. What she's referring to is the facts in regards to the actual data. Me, myself, I love the data. I love the information that comes from the research. And so that is exactly what we're going to be bringing to you today. So
okay. So as always, we do try to dive into a little bit of historic context. So yes. Now, most everybody thinks that slavery started in the U.S. right? Truth is, it started well over 400 years ago. And the actual fact of the matter is, slaves were brought in the slave trade, 1600. Now, they were brought in not as citizens, not as human beings. They were brought in as chattel property. Now, if you don't understand what that means, they were the equivalent of a cow or a pig, literally. And as animals were brought across the sea, they were brought in very compacted. Same thing happened with the slave trade. And they were traded just like buying pigs and cattle, to be quite honest. Now, obviously, many people are well aware that over the years we had a number of arguments. The Constitution granted equal rights to all citizens except for women, Indians, and African Americans, to be quite honest. So I dive in from this as a woman's perspective. You're going to dive into this from an African American's perspective. DEI covers both, to be quite honest, and even covers those of the queer label as well. But specifically from Black Americans' perspective, the most, I hate to say it, but provocative, long-held, and quite honestly, I would say diminished culture, quite honestly, and biggest suffragist throughout history would be the Black race to freedom, if you will, and equality. We had the Civil War. That was in 1773 to 1777. You had the Emancipation Proclamation, which most people assume was all slaves got to be free, but truth is it only freed the slaves in the slave-bearing states in the Confederate states and not necessarily in northern states. They had to actually ratify an amendment. It was abolishing the 13th Amendment, allowing for slavery, and it had to be actually ratified in order to move forward. So then you moved forward, and it was in 1865, the 13th Amendment was formally abolished, but freedom did not instantly mean equality. There were a number of steps that were supposed to happen in the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. That only took place for about 10 years. And it was a very traumatic 10 years. It was a wonderful 10 years if you were in the South and were of educated Black descendants. You got to rise and thrive quickly. But it didn't mean that it lasted, because as soon as it fell, the Jim Crow era came in and quickly brought in KKK results. People were mass murdered. They were lynched. They were refused education. They were refused their rights. Fill me in on any of this if you want to join in. But moving forward, there was a lot of push towards equality. You start with Brown versus Board of Education. Separate but equal was abolished. You had the entire civil rights moment. And I'm not trying to diminish this, but there's just a huge history there.
Correct.
And during the civil rights period, that's also when you start to see gay people try and get their own rights and freedoms and maybe not deal with so much discrimination. Fast forward, we're not trying to say that we have to make up for history. I don't think we are. What I am trying to look at are facts, and the facts based upon equality as to whether or not we're playing on an equal playing field. And to give it a sports analogy, in football, you basically switch fields halfway through the game, and why do you do that? Because you don't want one team having an unfair advantage.
Yeah, such as if the wind is blowing a certain direction.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so to me, DEI was a switching of the playing field of, hey, let's, instead of just handing one individual group, which was white male, all the advantages, how about let's allow for a little bit of freedom and equality? Didn't mean that people didn't deserve it, earn it, or whatnot. In my studies, even today, and in discussing with people, I found a number of people that quite honestly expressed the tone. I don't agree with it, but they expressed the tone and concern. They did not believe that African Americans had the same mental capacity. And I was stunned. I was stunned. Now, I do know some people, I know them to be racist, and I've limited them from access to me. But you expect that from some people, but you don't actually understand it when it's somebody that you didn't realize.
Correct.
And you're shocked. Like completely shocked. And I was like, oh, wow. But then you also lift up the veil and they don't think women are as capable either.
Correct.
Moving forward, if you think that this is just history and people trying to give backlash or making you feel bad, I actually did a quick case study and found 7 pieces of evidence in American history just over the last 100 years. And this is since the 13th Amendment was completely voted and abolished. Literally 7 different occasions in which there were African American communities thriving and they were completely shattered. And that kind of actually made me sad. And we'll go through them really quickly. Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898. It was the Wilmington Insurrection, or coup d'etat, where somewhere between 60 to 300 black residents were burned, their businesses burned, they were killed, and the city was transformed overnight from a black majority leadership to permanent white within just days. You look at East St. Louis, Illinois, 1917. It was a St. Louis massacre. Again, black residents had migrated north for industrial jobs. They got into the factories, and those factories were burned down. Their houses destroyed. At least 100 people were murdered. The true numbers are probably higher. You got Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is probably one of the more famous cases that are known. Tulsa race massacre of the Greenwood District, also known as Black Wall Street.
Oh, okay.
And 35 entire city blocks of black-owned homes and businesses were completely destroyed and abolished. 10,000 were left homeless, an economic hub for black enterprises, over 300 people killed. It just was erased in 48 hours. You've got Rosewood, Florida, another very famous massacre, basically sparked by false accusations that a black man assaulted a white woman. White mobs razed the entire town down in Rosewood. Most of the residents fled, and there were a number of them killed. They believe over 100 people killed, but the entire town was just razed. Then you've got Atlanta, Georgia, 1906, the Atlanta race riots. It was fueled again by sensationalist reports about alleged assaults on white women. White mobs basically killed dozens of black people. They looted the black businesses and destroyed their homes. You got Elaine, Arkansas in 1990. It's the Elaine Massacre, where black sharecroppers attempted to form a union, and they were met with mobs, and federal troops came in, and that anywhere between 100 to 800 black people were killed. Then you got Detroit, Michigan, happening both in 1943 and 1967. 2 separate uprisings, decades apart, and each sparked racial tensions, discrimination, and then you've got George Floyd era all the way up. It's still fucking happening.
So I got a question, even though, so all those are kind of related against black people. Has there ever been one like that or similar like that towards white people?
Towards white people?
Yeah.
Not once. But there was the Stonewall against transvestites and gay people in New York. And there's a huge era of police discrimination and beatings and discriminations all the way through history against gay people.
Was that large killings though? Because like these were like, you said 800 people, 1,000 people.
Not 800 people,
homes and stuff like that. This was, I guess what you're referring to is more of like the discrimination in general, but not necessarily the killings?
There were still killings. There were still killings.
Okay.
There were still lynchings of gay men and gay women throughout history.
Wow.
But they weren't as mob-like and not with that massive amount of numbers.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Then you get into whether or not they have the right to vote, and the answer is yes, you have the right to vote. Yeah. You get into the actual statistics and the overall cost of education the overall cost of homeownership, the overall cost of owning a car. And before we started this podcast, I had done a quick review of the overall cost it was, and you said I ruined your day.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah.
But there's a cost there to being a woman too. So,
yes. But even this part, I don't even think that, I know that black people probably don't even know this. And of course, it's also one of those things that even though you don't even know it, once you do know it, there's nothing you can do about it. And then,
Well, there are things you can do about it. I mean, acknowledging it and understanding it, but there are some components there that are systemic. And I'll give you several examples of actual systemic racism. Okay. If you look just at educational points, now when you go for grants, for college grants, everybody assumes that, or white people assume, that African Americans can get more scholarships, right? They get grants about 20% more than white Americans. However, when you look at merit-based scholarships, which are typically higher, the grants are small. They're like $500 to $2,500. And if you look at the average cost of schools, it's over $20,000 a year. You have to get a lot of tiny ones to just meet 1 year worth of schooling. And so the grants are smaller, but when you look at merit-based scholarships, whites beat out African Americans. African Americans get them less than 28% of the time. And now you're talking about whites get them 68% of the time. And I was one of the recipients of that.
Yeah.
It was a merit-based scholarship that I got to go to school on, which eliminated my need for student loans. But you know what? Somebody who got a bunch of grants, and let's say my school of college, which was Vanderbilt, cost $40,000 a year when I went to school. Now, I'm old now, so that was a long time ago. I'm sure it's way more expensive now. But somebody would have had to get probably 30, 40 grants just to make up what I did. And most people wouldn't get that.
Yeah.
They get 10 to maybe 15 grants, and then the rest was subsidized by student loans.
Yep.
So an average student would graduate with more than $100,000 worth of student loan debt, whereas I was gifted the benefit of not having any student loans.
Yep.
Now, was that a privilege of mine? Yes, it was. Did I take it? Absolutely. I did.
Was there a lot of black people at Vanderbilt?
No, there weren't a lot of gay people and there weren't a lot of black people. And I don't know of a whole lot of people that were really happy at it because it was a very white dominated school. It was very much, and if you think about DEI, it's kind of strange, but I think of DEI as far as school-based academics. If you had a white kid whose parents went to Vanderbilt, they were more likely to get accepted.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why? Was it because of based on merit or just because mommy and daddy happened to go to school? And the answer is mommy and daddy happened to go to school.
Correct.
That's not a merit-based. You were just born with the privilege that mommy and daddy went to that school. You didn't do anything for it.
Yeah, which means that obviously the people earlier on were white going to Vanderbilt. So obviously if they're kids and children and grandkids, they were probably going to be white as well. So it's easier for them
They were
to
given
keep.
more access.
Yeah.
Now also, if you start looking at home ownership, if your parents owned a home, the likelihood that you would own a home as well. Now, you are a recipient of that because your parents owned a home. Right?
Yep.
The expectation was probably there that you were going to do just as well, if not better than your parents. So home ownership was likely in your future.
Correct.
But your parents weren't the norm
No.
in 1970 and 1980.
No, much different. Neither one of my parents went to school. I mean, they went to Junco College, but that was it.
Okay.
Neither one of them. I was the first one in my family to have a degree.
I was too.
So yeah, it's definitely, and I grew up with a lot of people. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood at the time, and of course, I didn't see race growing up.
I find that interesting
Yeah,
though.
I never saw color. It was never an issue for me. But my friends, they always talked about it.
Were your friends
I mean, they were
black or were they white?
Black, yeah.
Were you in
My
a black
friends.
neighborhood or a white
No, I was
neighborhood?
in a white neighborhood.
Okay, so you grew up
Grew up in a white
in
neighborhood.
a white
but
neighborhood.
I had black friends, and so, but they had different experiences. I just never experienced anything that was related to a color, or at least I didn't know that I was experiencing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Is
So-
that because you just ignored it? Were you
Well,
an introvert?
I don't know, because I feel like I was too young to even know about it. So if my parents didn't teach me necessarily about it,
They
I
said,
wouldn't
"Just don't
necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily recognize it. As I'm
Okay.
older, I recognize a lot of stuff or more stuff. But yeah, my friends are a little bit different. But of course, I have to take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes you have friends that they don't look at everything from a fair perspective. They only look at it as against a black person perspective, and I don't like that perspective. I like to look at like the facts that we're talking about. That's the fair perspective.
Well, let's talk about amendments to the Constitution real quick, because I need to clarify, because I don't think I was very clear in the historical context. So in 1868, the 14th Amendment was actually ratified. All right. It granted citizenship and equal protection under the law to all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. That was meant specifically for slaves who were born in the U.S. but weren't considered citizens, because prior to the ratification and the abolishment of the 13th Amendment, basically they were considered chattel property.
Yes.
Okay. Unless they were given formal papers, and those papers had to stay with them.
So it was
at
only
all times.
for black people.
Only for black people. 15th Amendment prohibited racial discrimination in voting, but states soon created loopholes, meaning poll taxes, literacy test, and grandfather clauses. Grandfather clauses being, if your grandfather didn't vote, you didn't get to vote. I mean, like, all right. Well, enough said. In 1877 was when federal troops were withdrawn from the South. White supremacist regimes regained control in erasing most of the black political gains, and that's when we started to see Confederate statues erected, and they, in many areas, are still erected today. And you also have many ships and bases that are named after Confederate warriors. You want to go into the fight for equality over civil rights to DEI?
I don't know anything about it, but...
So let's kind of go over that, because when we didn't finish let's kind of finish the voting rights. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. This is where the Supreme Court legalized segregation under separate but equal. Voting rights crumbled under Jim Crow. Literally 1896 to about 1970 is when, for another 80 years, blacks had the right to vote, but it was kind of prevented from voting.
Yeah.
It also was prevented them from getting an equal opportunity education. Even in the 1950s, most African Americans didn't even graduate with a 5th grade education. Like, they mostly left and went into the workforce at 3rd grade education. Think about that. That's your daughter's age.
Wow.
8 years of age. Isn't she 8?
7, yeah.
So give her one more year and she'll be ready to hit that workforce, bud. Now, does that hit home? Because that hit my gut. Because I can't imagine, I mean, my oldest grandson is about to be 5. He would have 3 more years. And I'm like, now he's smart enough and he's intelligent enough, but would I want him to start working his fingers to the bone at the age of 8?
Yeah.
The answer's no.
Yeah, it's crazy. But also, I want to ask you a question. So, in my household, of course, I grew up where my parents would preach a lot about you need to go vote because it's a privilege, it's a right. Did you grow up with that same mentality? Because we got given the right, which really wasn't the right, but at some point we finally could. So was it different from your perspective than mine?
I'm going to say no, and that was specifically due to my stepmother, who very much instilled in me that as a woman, we had to speak up. Okay? Not to say that she didn't lean in or understand or listen to what my father said, but there was definitely a valid split in my family during the Reagan years, I remember. Because my mom couldn't stand Reagan. And basically, she didn't want anything to do with Republican politics because she felt like she had experienced herself a lot of discrimination. You kind of follow along the flow. Women were also struggling for these rights. Yeah. They didn't have the right to own and get their own bank accounts until 1970.
Yeah.
And credit cards. And she was discriminated against, and I tell a lot of my clients this, in mortgage lending, my mom was discriminated against by a bank. She had perfect credit scores, 20% down, 3-year job history, and she was told, go get a cosigner, go get your daddy to go cosign, okay? And if you can imagine somebody that does all the things that are set up to do right, and you still need permission to do that, that struck home with her. Yeah. And she was very vocal in relaying over these things you have to take care of. You have to take care of your credit. You have to take care of your name. You have to take financial responsibility, and you do not listen to anybody. No man, no woman. Don't listen to anybody. You have to take care of these. And if someone tells you that you don't have equal rights, that she didn't use the word BS, but she was very clear that that was not what she believed in, and that I was expected to go and vote not just my wallet, but my responsibilities as a human being.
Gotcha.
She was very clear about that. Okay. Now my dad, he was like, vote for your wallet, pumpkin. And I was like, I don't think so, Daddy. So kind of funny, because I love my dad dearly, but I didn't agree with him politically all the time.
Yeah.
Now, as he got older, he did recognize that there were a lot of discriminatory policies, and it's kind of funny. We had for years, when I had come out, we really did not talk for a number of years and just had a terrible relationship. And then one day, I guess it really tore him up because he learned about the discrimination of gays and lesbians. And he turned to me, and you got to know, my dad at the time, he wasn't a man of a bunch of words, but he goes, "Your people." I said, "My people?" And he goes, "Your people are getting crapped on, Rob." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Your people, they're being discriminated against." And I was like, "Dad, I'm not the Moses of gay and lesbians, Pop." And he goes, "But y'all got to do something about this." And I was like, "How do you want me to do?" He's like, "You need to go be a lawyer. You need to go argue with people." And I was like, "I don't want to argue with people." But it took him probably 10 years to realize that there were discriminatory policies. And there is this play and maneuver that people have done. You've done it. I've done it. A whole lot of people behind us have done it. Of play to get along, and you just deal. So with that, let's talk about the fight for equality for a while. 1948, Executive Order 9981, President Truman desegregated the U.S. military. So that was 75 years ago. That was your grandfather.
Okay.
Okay. Brown versus Board of Education was 1954. Again, your grandfather's time, but starting in with your dad's time. Civil rights movement was 1955 to 1968. You're talking Rosa Parks, MLK Jr., Malcolm X, countless other activists fighting for segregation through marches and the fight against, segregation, sit-ins, boycotts, but all, for the most part, nonviolent, except for the federal troops that were in the white people. 1968, Fair Housing Act prohibited discrimination in housing, a major blow to redlining and neighborhood segregation. Now, you know what redlining is? It's where a bank will go through a map and redline out where they will and won't do their financing.
Oh.
And they'll target specific neighborhoods, or if they target specific neighborhoods, it's because it has a higher interest rate. So that is something that we're trained on even still today. That was in my continuing education.
Yeah, which reminds me of the stuff you talked about before we started shooting this video, which was relation to how much blacks, or how much it costs to be black. I know a lot of you might not understand that, but it is true. This is a fact. It actually costs more for a black person than it does a white person.
Okay, so let's do the quick breakdown of this, because this will churn your stomach.
Yeah.
I have ruined your freaking whole weekend. I'm sorry, man. Auto financing. Average African Americans pay 70 basis points more. It costs about $410 a year. Then you look at black borrowers in the used car loan market. They pay a difference between 9.5 versus 7.5% interest rates on the loans, but they also pay an average of about $2,000 per car more.
Now
these are just flat out statistics from like the Fed.
Now, are these statistics looking at a white person and a black person with the same type of criteria?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't have time to break it down for gays and lesbians.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, because obviously if a black person had bad credit, then that kind of lines up. But no, they can't look at statistics from that perspective.
Well, they actually can look at it, and there is like a 60-point discrepancy on FICO scoring between African Americans and white people based off of age and income. But there is the question of whether or not there is a historical education process for them, because whites have the history of having more income, statistically speaking, for the last, 400 years. And on top of that, so more disposable income meant that they were able to invest more. More disposable income also meant that they could buy housing more readily, and they were able to pass on those traits and habits with their sons and daughters more readily. Yeah. Then you go on to, I'm going to tell you this, that my parents were adamant about an education in finances. So I think I was 12 when we got my first bank account and checking specifically. And each month they were very specific about me balancing my checkbook. They also were specific to training me on what contracts were. I remember that because they were like, here's a witness, here's a contract, here's you entering into a contract. My first contract was with my parents, and it was based off of my grades. And if I didn't make a certain amount of grades, I owed them money, actually.
Yeah, you told us.
Yeah. So moving back to cost of skin color, car insurance. Now, this one caught me. African American households paid significant significantly higher insurance expenditures per vehicle, about $1,581 for African American households versus $658 for households in one data set. Now, these are active, current items from the Consumer Federation of America, and they found that it was based off of age, race, driving status. Also, most recent state level and local zip codes in Georgia show that in black majority zip codes, premiums can be 25% higher than in white majority areas. So we're talking a difference of $4,423 versus $3,342. And the same goes for insurance on homes. So if you are in a predominantly African American area or zone targeted by zip code, then you will see a spike in your rates, literally. In Washington, D.C., a report found black drivers paid an average of 46% more than white drivers on auto insurance. So these are driven by state. So as much as they say we want this all based on state, it's local regulatory agencies that are in charge of this, and they're allowing for the discrimination to happen based off of insurance, which is kind of a nefarious thing because when you go in, you're going to call Progressive and they're going to ask you and they'll pull up your database. They can access your information based off of, they'll have a clues report exactly on your home. They know exactly how far your home is away from a fire hydrant in the police department. Yep. They'll know crime statistics. They will know all these factors about you, whether or not you even relay them over. And those factors feed into their algorithms, and their algorithms are designed to charge higher interest rates. It's not an individual insurance agent that's doing the charges.
Correct, yeah.
So you could have an African American insurance agent really trying to do justice with you, but the algorithm on the back end is requiring them to charge more.
Wow.
Legitimately. So then you have other nuanced factors like housing, and there are statistics in housing, and there's a continued ongoing argument in housing. One is whether or not there's discrimination that occurs based off of appraisal systems. Now, if you ask independent appraisers, they will say absolutely not. We don't discriminate. We don't care whose house it is. If you ask realtors, and every realtor that I've ever talked to that is black said, I will sit my clients down and we will talk about how we de-black the home.
Correct.
And I actually have a clip, and I talked to a great agent and friend of mine, and we talked about it and have posted that on the internet, and people are like, that's not right, that's not true. And I'm like, but yet they're still having to have that conversation.
It's the reality.
So then you look at African Americans as far as there's a HMDA on mortgage loans. And HMDA is basically data that we have to fill out as far as ethnicity and whether or not you are of a minority descent, male, female, that kind of thing, right? And whether or not you prefer the English language. So with that respect, they take that information, and actually in the class that I was attending, now my applicants, usually about 80-90% of the time they'll fill this in. And I tell them it's just to make sure that I'm not discriminating. Apparently, according to the class I just took, about more than 60% of the time, those pieces of information are left blank. But
it's left blank by black people?
Hard to tell. Hard to tell. We were just told that the statistic is that they are not filled out. But
because I would assume
African Americans
yes,
statistically usually pay 0.25% higher.
Yeah. So
now that's about, on a $400,000 loan, you're probably looking at about $100 plus in higher payments. So now you're talking about another $1,200. Then, so you've got higher insurance rates, you've got higher mortgage costs, you've got higher auto insurance rates, higher cost for the auto, higher cost for the auto financing, and then you get into whether or not they're making equal amounts of income. And what is the statistics that you came across that you were kind of bummed out about?
Well, yeah,
male to male.
We know, well, I guess black people statistically, I don't have it on my paper, but black people statistically make less than white people. So from what you just talked about, they're charging black people more, but black people make less, which obviously the offset, and that has nothing to do with DEI, right? That's just
that's just
what's
straight up. That's just straight up statistics. However, with DEI and the activities that have been going on for the previous 20 years.
However, it does have something to do with white privilege. privilege, because a lot of people that are going against DEI are saying that it is the opposite of white privilege, if you will, saying that there is no discrimination in regards to black people. But the statistics are very telling you that there is a discrepancy in regards to how African American people are treated, not just getting a job, which a lot of people focus on DEI, getting a job and what you're doing in the workplace. But outside of that, black people are still being discriminated, and DEI potentially could help with that, because what DEI is designed to do is make things more equal, right?
Well, inclusive. It was never designed to be equal. And where I also find, because I actually read articles from the Heritage Foundation. And Heritage Foundation is a group that actually is opposed to DEI. And very much, it's kind of interesting, the arguments that they laid off. They found that DEI was manipulative and is trying to make people feel guilty about past actions, or by being white, feeling guilty by benefits that are laid upon them, and that it's psychological warfare. And the other aspect that I found also recently with Charlie Kirk was that he felt like if someone got a job specifically because of DEI, would meant that they weren't qualified for it, and that they took a white person's position.
And I read that in my studies as well. However, I would say that, has anyone ever known that a black person took a job over a white person and both of them were qualified? I find it hard to believe that a white manager, because let's go ahead and put it out there, majority of managers in upper leadership is white. And do you think that they're going to have two candidates, one white and one black, and they're going to take the black one over the white one, and the white one is more qualified? There is no way I would ever see that happening just because they're trying to meet a DEI quote. Me personally, I think that they will probably still hire the white person and figure out how to hire the black person so that they can meet the certain number criteria that they have to have in their organization.
So it's interesting, because I think it's on concept bias of not really understanding what qualifications are. It's interesting if you look at applications between men and women, just specifically, take the black race out of it. Okay? Women will only apply for a job if they know they meet every single aspect of that requested qualification. Men, however, statistically, if there's 10 qualifications and they meet 3, they're, fuck it, I'm going for it, and they apply for it.
That's true.
Okay? So they're overestimating their value and their importance in their historical work history. Now, I would say, because just in my own experience, snow cone stands, we always look at a microcosmic situation. We actually hire young men and young women to work in the stores. We've hired transgender, African Americans, Black, Asians, Latinos, doesn't matter. The classification that we have the most difficulty with, young white men. And they walk in, and literally, I'll give you an instance. There's a young man who walked in, and he actually said, "I'm your new boss," to all the women. And I was like, and what was weird was they're like, "Well, we didn't know." And I'm like, "Why wouldn't you ask me?" "No, he's not your damn boss. He's your freaking trainee." And no. And they were like, "He told us." He just walked in and said, I was like, "Come here, dude. Did you tell him that?" And he chuckled. And I said, "Do you think that's funny? This is day one, and this is how you act?" He goes, "Well, they believe me." And I said, "If you pull that shit again, you're fired. And if you think it's funny, you're fired as well. Take your pick." He goes, "No, I didn't mean nothing by it." I said, "Okay." So that kid worked out for all of a week and a half, and he had to find another job. I've also had to fire young men for inappropriate behavior with a label maker. I kid you not. Like, weirdly enough, I will tell you, they have overestimated their abilities, and consistently, and the women do the hard work. And it doesn't matter what type of woman, they just do the hard work. They always do the hard work. Yeah. And the young men are the ones that I have trouble with, because they overestimate their importance and their abilities. So that may be discrimination, but that's the history that we have had. But we also understand that, statistically speaking, if you got 10 directives for a job opening, men meet 3 of them and miss 7, they will still apply for the job. Women, if they hit 9 of them and miss the 10th, sometimes they won't apply because they feel they're not qualified.
Wow.
And so part of it is the anticipation of their mental state of, they believe, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and apply, and if they believe in me, I'll just work my way into it. Literally, they will. And women feel like they have to prove themselves before they earn it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So taken into that context, I think there's just a different mentality. Now, the other thing I found was, and this was before I started playing poker. Now, I love poker, right? I love it now, not because I like gambling. I don't like it in particular for losing money because I work too damn hard for my money. What I love is the understanding of negotiations and bluffing tactics. And there are groups teaching women how, young women, how to play poker because it's helping them with negotiation tactics and renegotiating their salaries. Because women do not necessarily, they're just generally speaking, not necessarily good at negotiating salaries. And I don't know of a place that teaches them how to.
That's interesting.
Well, I would love it if you started teaching your daughter, who is a young one. She probably is great at negotiating when she wants something with you.
Yeah.
But she might not necessarily be taught how to go and ask for a raise.
Yeah, because I had to learn, and I didn't probably learn till 28, 30.
Okay.
You know?
Who taught you?
A coworker.
Okay, so somebody mentored you. It was a coworker that mentored you.
Yeah.
Now, was he white or black?
He was on a friend side. So
He was on the friend side.
Yes, friend side. Black, but he was higher up in the company.
So you were mentored by somebody else.
Yeah. And I reached out to him and said, because I'm like, look, he's higher up than me, so he's much smarter than me. So let me just call him and see what he says. And I wasn't even asking for what he gave me, but what he gave me changed my whole insight and gave me an additional $20,000 $some.
Nice.
And I would have never known.
I'm currently being mentored by a man who makes a lot more money than me, and I listen and I absorb everything that he does. Now, I don't get to speak to him as much as I want to, and it's a unique situation, but I have learned so much from him. And I will tell you that I have had the opportunity to mentor kids through the snow cone stands. That is probably one of the biggest things that I get from running those snow cone stands, is watching and looking for these kids. They are hungry for mentorship. And they want it.
Yeah.
So I actually talked to a friend of mine, and I know this friend I consider him racist. He doesn't consider himself racist.
Of course.
And I actually told him, I said, so we get into this long conversation, mostly about white privilege, DEI, and some of these very same issues.
Yeah.
And he is a believer that he has struggled all the way through life and that he has earned every ounce of it, and he feels like DEI gives things away where he feels like he has earned it. Okay. And I said, so have you had mentors along the way? He goes, well, yeah. And I said, okay, so who were these mentors? And he's a white guy, and they were all white guys. Okay. And I said, so let me ask, have you ever mentored a black kid? And he goes, no. And I said, why not? And he said, because the opportunity has never presented itself. And I said, could that be because you don't have any black people in your life? And he goes, well, yeah, but it just hadn't presented itself. And I said, have you ever asked? He goes, well, no, I don't think they would want to listen to me. And I said, that's interesting. I said, I'm going to ask you to start looking for opportunities, because here's the thing. If you don't look for those opportunities, they're never going to show up. But if you actually look for them, one will pop up. And as a mentor, it'll make you grow faster than you would on your own. You'll give more, but you'll grow more.
Correct.
Right?
It's the same as looking for a job. They just don't knock on doors.
No.
You actually have to apply, and you have to keep applying and keep knocking, keep looking, like you just said, and then the opportunity will show its face.
So as a general rule, I personally believe in the hard work ethic and doing everything you can to promote yourself in every aspect, whether it's through physical fitness, whether it is through knowledge base, whether it is through growing your social network. It does not matter. I don't think DEI was ever designed to take away personal responsibility.
No.
And I also don't think it was ever designed to say, hey, we're taking jobs from a white person.
Yeah.
But I think that is the context that some people are coming from.
Correct.
If an African American got a job, he must have taken it from someone else. And my response is, well, you don't know what that person had to deal with and learn and grow through to even get to the same playing level, or perhaps even exceeding that level.
Yeah. Or taking a job from another black person.
Yes.
Speaking of that, one of the white privilege ways that are against DEI, they're tying this into, they basically are considering it as white fragility, which is basically punishing merit. And it's not necessarily punishing merit, because DEI is not saying take the black person over someone else that's better qualified. That is not what it says. It just says, hey, we noticed that you only have 1% of black people in your organization. We want you to at least get to 10%. It doesn't say take the horrible people and replace them with the better people. That's just not what it says. However, that's kind of what the other side is suggesting, that it's punishing all the people that have done very well for themselves and have great education. And that's just not necessarily true. So I want you to hire me because I can do the job, not because I'm black, and I'm a black person. So I don't want you to hire me because I'm black. I want you to hire me because I can do the job. Now, if you don't think I can do the job, then we can have a discussion about why I can't do that job so I can get better and come back and try again.
So with the white fragility thing, I do laugh at it because it actually is really a thing. And I actually think women and gays and black people need to start cracking up a little bit more about this. Like literally, don't be so frail. It's okay. Calm down. But that's where the calm down Karen came from as well.
Yeah.
And literally the issue is, if you look at nepotism is basically the concept to where somebody's given something because their parents did something.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, your parents are white, you get to be white. Guess what? As long as mom doesn't screw the mailman, you're good, right? So here it is. You're given the whiteness. You're given whatever your parents did and actually handed a legacy based off of that. Mm-hmm. That is the equivalent of handing someone something that they did not fucking earn.
Correct.
Okay? It is the quintessential. When you start claiming the white privilege, or maybe you won't even say it's white privilege. Maybe you'll just say, you know what? The concept is I earned everything.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you didn't start at step 1. You got to start at step 3.
Yeah. So I bring this up all the time because, especially the black community, especially when I'm talking to people, that I grew up with or other black people. And the way I see it is black people, we start from a negative number all the time. We're starting at negative 100. So we're still trying to catch up just to be break even. Now that comes with finances and all of that just because we've been sort of held back in the past. Like she just mentioned in regards to how much more we have to pay for auto insurance, cars, loans, and things of that sort. We're starting at a negative number. And I've always said white people start at 0. They start at 0.
Not necessarily.
I know, not necessarily, but white privilege, which it says right here in the definition, white privilege refers to unearned advantages white people experience in societies shaped by racial hierarchy. So like you just mentioned, the college you went to, because your parents went here, so obviously it makes it easier for
there were a lot of kids.
And if that school was already 90+% white, then it makes it hard for a black person to get in because it's easy.
They were legacy students is the expression.
Exactly.
When you are a legacy student, your parents went to. Now I was not a legacy kid. None of my kids were legacy kids. Mm-hmm. And literally, I got in just off the, what is it? The skin of my teeth kind of thing, I mean, I barely made it in and barely made it out. But I got there. But no, there is the concept, and I understand why people say there is no white privilege. And I'll give you an example.
I understand too.
Because you don't know what you don't know. And I'll give you 2 examples that happened recently to me where a friend of mine wanted to, I was like, okay, so explain to me, because I feel like I work my ass off. And I feel like I really try to make my money work for me. Mm-hmm. And he goes, Robin, you're always fucking late. And I said, yeah, I am. You're right. And he goes, and I've seen you drive. He goes, you speed everywhere you go. And I was like, yeah. He goes, and you'll get right up behind somebody and then you'll be frustrated because they're driving the speed limit, and then you zoom on around them to catch up because your ass is late. Right? Mm-hmm. He goes, did you ever look at him? I was like, yeah, I stare him down all the time. He goes, no, did you look at him? I was like, no. He goes, look. Start counting. Because right now in your head, you always think that they're grandma and grandpa. But next time, look at them and tell me and count how many of them are black or Hispanic. And I said, fine. Thinking, no way, it's always grandma and grandpa that are keeping me from getting there on time, right?
Yeah.
Turns out, 9 times out of 10, black person.
Really?
So we went back and had lunch because I wanted to know what the hell was this about. And he said, speeding is a white privilege. You don't fucking know it because you've lived with it all your life. You don't worry about getting pulled over and having a gun pulled on you and shot because you're white. He goes, but my kids, I have to have that talk with them. My kids, I tell them, do not speed. You use your turn signals because you could get pulled over for not using your turn signals and you find yourself in jail.
Yes.
And that is not something that my daddy had ever had to have a conversation with me about.
That's one of the easier statements that we say all the time.
But no, white privilege, speeding, white privilege, does anybody ever talk about
We've
this?
never talked about from the speeding perspective. We've talked about in the black community, we do have to tell our kids
hands on the wheel
and, to respect authority because they could throw you in jail. Obviously, the statistics show that more black people are incarcerated, as well as you could get shot or whatever for talking back. Those are things. And I believe from my studies and asking other people, their parents never had that, from my white friends, their parents never had that discussion with them.
We do not have that talk.
It was never a concern whatsoever.
Right.
But we don't necessarily talk about the speeding part, but we do talk about the getting pulled over from that perspective. And funny story, I did get pulled over in my own neighborhood. And the first thing the white officer asked me was, "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Simple as that. But guess what I was doing when he pulled me over? Window was already down and I was like this. Yes, sir, no, sir. Because I had already been taught how to respond to police officers, because I want to make sure that I get to live and I get to go back home. White people don't understand that unless you have a black friend. You just don't understand it.
Now, my parents, the conversation was, you get pulled over, you get a ticket, you have to pay. No, you have to pay for the ticket and you have to pay for the difference and if you have to take defensive driving, you're paying for that shit too. My parents did not tell me you could go to jail, you could get shot, you could do all these things. That wasn't the conversation.
It was never a concern.
And I don't know of any white people that had that conversation. So that is ground level one.
Yes.
Okay?
That's your example number one. What's number two?
It was with your wife, actually. It's kind of funny. This is kind of funny. Here it is. We're attending this event, and they are doing IV infusions, for hydration.
I remember.
And we go in, and I'm like, Beth, do you want one? And she goes, hell no, I don't want them sticking me. I don't like needles. And I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and get an IV for it. So here I am, and your wife is, we're all at this party having a good time. And they stick me once and can't find my vein. And they stick me twice, can't find my vein. And then they go and grab this damn pillow, and it's a pink pillow. I can't stand the color pink. And they put it under my arm. And then they put some ice on me. And I'm like, guys, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's fine. They wound up sticking me 6 times. Right? And at the end of it, I was like, I'm done. Y'all can't find a damn vein. And they're like, okay. But your wife is over in the corner and she's like, the girl next to you, they stuck 6 times and didn't get a damn pillow for her. Robin, that was literally a small little item of they felt like you needed a pillow. And I'm like, they thought it was soft? And she was like, yeah, poor little white girl. She goes, better luck next time. But I was just like.
She said that? Wow.
Yeah, she was like, better luck next time. She was pretty funny about it. And it was funny, and it was in a climate and in a group to where we could laugh about it. But the aspect was they were worried about my perspective, but not worried about the girl sitting next to me. And I was like, I got to be honest, I didn't even notice because in this group, we just don't even think about it.
Correct, you don't see,
But for Tiffany, she was like, let me tell you the difference of what you just missed. And I was like, wow, they thought I was weak. That's bullshit, man. I mean, like, I got mad because we were in a gym. I didn't want them thinking I was weak. But she's like, yeah, they thought your ass was weak. Sorry. But it was funny. And I took it as a joke, but I was like, wow, how much else am I missing? And
that's how I feel, or at least my past years. I try to pay more attention now because my friends say so much stuff and I can't relate to them. Or my black friends, they say so much and I can't relate to them. So as I get older, I'm trying to pay attention more to see if I just missed it.
Right.
That something might have happened. Because like I said, growing up, I didn't see color.
But that's the thing, though. I mean, you grow up with your own lens and your own perspective.
Correct.
And you think that's the perspective that everybody has.
Yep.
And the truth is, we don't. You want to put those on?
No.
Because you'll get a fucked up vision perspective on my glasses.
Not to see through it, but I'm saying until you put on someone else's glasses, you won't see what's really going on with the opposite of your skin color. You've got, which is like you said, your friend that's never mentored a black person, he won't understand a lot of other stuff that's going on until he has that conversation with them. To see the difference, that it's not the way you saw through your eyeglasses.
Yes.
It's on a different side, Like, for example, if I'm driving down the road with a white person in my car, and if I get pulled over, the way I'm going to respond to a police officer, that white guy's going to be wondering what the hell I'm doing. Because it's foreign. Dude, why you got your hands on the steering wheel like you're all nervous? Relax. And black people know you don't relax. Because you can't relax. Because I don't know what's about to happen. I got the lights turned on me on the freeway. It was 2 in the morning. You think I pulled over on the side of the freeway? Nope.
Montreal, who?
Nope. I drove an extra 2 miles to get to an exit, to get to a gas station with a lot of lights and cameras, so I could feel safe and be video camera versus on the side of the freeway.
Wow.
There was no other option. There's just no way I'm pulling over on the side of the freeway.
Okay.
At night.
All right.
But,
so let's talk personal responsibility. I mean, like if you were to, I mean, you have a son, he's 15. And obviously, given your upbringing, you don't lean into DEI. And when you came into this, I don't think you actually believed in DEI. You believe in statistics.
Yeah.
And you hate the statistics. But you being more conservative, self-involved is the wrong word, self-dependent, and you believe that, you know, you work for what you get. What are you going to do to balance with your son about the difference between perspective versus DEI versus other people's perspective? What are you going to try and teach him and train him?
I think trying to teach him, because I base my stuff off reality. So the reality is there's a problem. So I kind of operate according to that problem, not operating because it should be this way. I'll never operate because it should be this way, because you're just going to continue to keep running up against failure. So I operate off of, this is our reality, so this is how you should act according to our reality. Until that changes, DEI was a sort of piece trying to move in the right direction, but that doesn't mean that it's changed. So the reality, it is what it is. You're still going to get discriminated. People are still going to treat you different. You're still going to get charged more. You're going to have to work harder than someone else has to work. So therefore, I want to teach according to that, because that is the current reality. And that's what I always try to operate off of. What is it like? Even though I don't agree with it, it is the reality. And so kind of teach him that. And I want to show him all the ways, you know, different from perspectives, and show him what I believe in, but I want to allow him to actually think outside the box. So I don't want to say that you have to believe in this way. No, you know, so like, for example, my son likes white girls, you know, Tiffany, not happy with it. I could care less, because I'd rather you be happy than not. So I could just care less, but that's the reality. We live in a white neighborhood. He goes to a white school. Why wouldn't I think that he's going to like a white person? It's just common, you know, but that's the reality. So that's kind of what I think I want to raise according, so that you know how to deal with the current situation, not of how the situation should be, because it can never get that way. It might not ever get that way. And I've taught you that way, if that makes sense.
And mentors, when you talk to your son, are you going to encourage him to get mentors, and would you encourage him to get a black mentor or a white mentor, or both?
Never really thought about color of mentor.
Okay.
I just think there's just someone that could lead him, because I have a lot of friends that don't really care about color. You know, they're black, but it's not an issue for them. So, and he does have some of my friends, they get the kids together and talk to them as well, and vice versa. So they're getting a little bit from that at this age as far as mentorship. But obviously, you know, when it comes to finance and work, I feel like that's kind of my area. So I'm going to be focused on that a lot. So, but it just depends. I mean, it's not necessarily I have it planned out. So it's kind of a, you know, as you go along, you know, and see how he's receptive. So
with me, and I have children, and I also have kids that work for us. And I think my takeaways are that, one, knowledge is, you can't beat it. You just can't beat knowledge as a pathway to get out of this situation. Number one. Number two, the next thing is to find mentors, and find really good ones, like ones that you never thought, like moonshot mentors. And the reason being is you want to find those people that can lay the path, that can provide some evidence to find that path forward. And for white people, guess what? Here's the challenge. If you don't believe in DEI, then believe in this, that you need to be a mentor. A mentor for a young woman, a young man, Indian, Latino, doesn't matter, black. Go be a mentor, and guess what? Maybe you'll find new evidence of the challenges that some of these kids, they're just not born with, and given the same educational level and standards and expectations. The final thing that I came away with this was, we not just vote every 4 years, we vote every single day. And here's how you vote. You vote every time and every chance you get when the the polls are open. You vote every single day with where you put your mind at and your focus, and you vote every single day where you put your money at. What this told me is that women who make about an average 18% less than men, that your disposable income, what little disposable income you have, is more powerful and more important to make sure that you are specifically targeting what you need to target, whether it's homeownership, whether it's investments, whether it's savings, whether it's the power of your own economy. You really have to spend it and spend it accordingly with investments both in yourself and in your future. And the same thing goes for blacks and Indians. Native Americans, doesn't matter. If you were earning less or you were in these economically diverse and challenged groups, then guess what? If you're in a diversity group, your income is that vote. Literally, invest and go find those mentors, period.
Yep.
Because that's where we're going to make equality, is when you actually do start putting aside money and bringing real wealth to the table. Because it's money and reasons why they are using money against us and using algorithms against us.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. Well,
I really thought I was going to get more of an argument from you, man.
No.
I just ruined your freaking weekend.
Yeah, and my birthday, so.
Happy birthday, dude.
Yeah. So,
it sucks to be you. You got to work harder.
I know, right? But yeah, this is definitely a good conversation, especially in our current climate. It's calmed down a little bit right now, but previously we all can relate that we've all been hearing about this quite a little bit more than what we've wanted to. So definitely want to get that discussion about what we consider as fake news. And like I said, that's applicable on both sides of the aisle, depending on what you believe in and what you don't believe in. So, but anyways, we would love to get your thoughts on this particular topic, white privilege and DEI. So if you do get an opportunity, please comment. We would love to hear from you, and obviously we would take the opportunity to respond back to you if you have any suggestions on what you would like us to talk about in the near future. We would love to hear that as well. Outside of all that, that's all I have.
Well, if you want to check up on any of the facts and histories, it's really easy to check out. You can check out Encyclopedia. You can check out with the Fed. Consumer Protection Financial Bureau also has these statistics. There's a number of areas where you can check out and double check the facts for yourself. Don't just take our word for it. Definitely do your own investigation. But if you don't have time, join us on the F word, because we love to bring up facts with reality and challenge just about every notion under the sun.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, hey, we appreciate you guys joining, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye.
Have a good one.